49% trust the national government to do what is right for the United Kingdom. 49% trust the national government to do what is right for the United Kingdom. 52% satisfied the way of democracy, the way democracy is working in United Kingdom. That's about United Kingdom. The study conducted by Pew Research Center. About India, the same study says 85%, here number is high compared to UK, 85% trust the national government to do what is right for India. There are 79% satisfied the way democracy is working in India. So I'm reminded by this, the writings of Plato. Plato had this great worry about democracy. The citizens would live from day to day, indulging the pleasure of the moment. Now, we are living in a world where the service delivery and the public provisions are given by the alternate ways of providing. These delivery systems are given by the private agencies. And remembering recording what I mentioned earlier, good democracy versus strong economy. And China is growing. We had this conversation early in the morning also. China is growing, and they are able to improve the expectation, the life expectancy, and the economic improvement of citizens in every 10 years, where in the past, it would have taken 30 years. So there's a debate about whether the Chinese model or the democratic model that we practice in India, UK, is the future of parliamentary democracy.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm Daniel Zeichen, a Member of Parliament for Cambridge. And can I echo the thanks, first of all, to all of you for making this discussion happen. Can I say this is a much more theoretical and academic discussion than we normally have in the United Kingdom. I don't remember Plato being raised in the UK Parliament, and that is a weakness, I think, for our Parliament and our system. And this question of trust in democracy is really, really important. And in our country, we have seen the debate around Britain's role in the European Union has reflected, I would say, a lack of trust for politicians. So the numbers that you quote do not come as a great surprise to me. In fact, I'm surprised that half the country thinks the government's doing okay. Mostly, we feel it's less than that. The question is, why in a mature democracy like Britain do people not believe in it anymore? And that's the big challenge for people like us. And when we look at the comparison with China, some people say, China gets things done. I do transport in Britain. It takes us a long time to build a railway in Britain because we have a democracy which allows everyone to have their say and lots of people to object. I think in China, they get it done because people don't have a say. So the question is, which is better? Now, I think the British system is better. It's slower, but I think in the long term, it'll prove more able to deal flexibly with the kind of challenges, the very big challenges that we have. But it's a very good question. And we thought 15 years or so ago that democracy would win everywhere. When Francis Fukuyama wrote The End of History, there was an assumption that liberal democracy would triumph everywhere. Since then, it's been different. And in Britain, we have a real crisis in democracy, probably. So I'm speaking for myself here. I'm not sure that my colleagues agree. But this is a very interesting discussion. This is the kind of discussion we have probably more in Cambridge than we do have in Parliament.
Yeah, I'm sort of slowly fermenting here with anger because we've been here a while and all I've heard is from men. And when Craig opened his comments and said that he wants to hear from you, I saw all the women just with little faces lit up. So can I please pass the mic over and see my sisters in the audience speak so that we can have hopefully some enlightening debate, because I want to hear from you, and of course you men are invited to that as well, but we've heard a lot from men, so I'd really like to hear some of the women in the audience if that is possible. Thank you.
I'm a teacher at nearby college. I have a question on the relevance of the upper houses in both Britain and in India. How democratic are these upper houses? Because in Britain, this was a tribute to the aristocracy, and in India it has been a vestige from colonial period where we gave importance to the princely states as representatives of the princes. So there was a mention of reform of the House of Lords. Could you tell us some more about it? And in India, is any reform of the Rajya Sabha being ever contemplated? Is there any scope or any relevance of India going the Senate, way of the Senate, US Senate, where there is equality for the states? Right now, the Rajya Sabha or the House of Lords is not about representation for the states, but rather for specific groups. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes, there you go.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. And we'd be interested to hear your views as well, not just your question. One of the things I think is wrong with how democracy works is you have a small number of politicians, and quite often it is men, but much larger number of people, voters, and we assume the politicians know the answers. We don't. We're just people like you, so we want to hear from you. We have our opinions, but I'm interested in your opinion too, as well as your question. My view about your particular point about the upper house, the British upper house, the House of Lords, is not democratic at all. It's appointed on the whole. It's not inherited, apart from a small number of lords. It's supposed to be appointed, but they're not elected. So we tour the world and we talk about Britain being the oldest parliamentary democracy, which we are, but the upper house of the British Parliament is not democratic in the slightest. So there are real issues there. And I don't know enough about the Indian system to be able to comment, I'm afraid. But I will, if I can, make a more general point, since we're talking about parliamentary democracy. And I think the parliamentary system, having a parliament, is necessary, but it's not sufficient. It's not enough on its own. You can't have democracy that operates only at the very top level. Democracy has to work all the way through society. And my view is that Parliament cannot work unless there is power throughout the whole of society. So I believe in maximum democracy, power to the people. That's what the word means. And I had the opportunity to put that theory into action. I was the leader of a very high-profile council, a local authority in central London. It's called Lambeth Council. If you know London, it goes from where the London Eye is, the River Thames, all the way down through Brixton. And we piloted a completely different model of running a council that put power in the hands of people. So we put tenants in charge of their own housing. We gave young people control of services to support young people. We put patients and disabled people in charge of services for healthcare and support for disabled people. We put parents and communities in charge of the schools. We created a local economy so that local people could have more control over how money was shared out in the local community, and we set up cooperatives that gave unemployed people the power to not only get work, but define how they were going to be treated as employees. So a very, very radical model of empowerment. And I think we need to be looking not just at is the House of Lords elected or appointed, but how do you put real power into the hands of real people all the time, not just at election time. And I think if we cannot fix that question, then we run the risk, as we've seen in the United States, and perhaps in India, I don't know, we have, in India, it has a nationalist party in power as well, but in the United States, Donald Trump is extremely divisive and wants to disempower people and take it to himself. So I think democracy is under threat globally unless we find ways to deepen and strengthen democracy at every single level. And I would seek to do it by having a model of maximum democracy that lies underneath and supports Parliament rather than just talk about Parliament itself.
Thank you. The question.
Okay,
The question regarding
upper house in India. Actually, this is unlike that of House of Lords in UK, in Britain. In India, it's an elected body, except that 12 members who are being nominated by His Excellency the President, all of the members are being elected on the basis of the state electorate, because the number of members of the state legislature is the criteria for electing members to the upper house. So it is being indirectly elected. So it's an elected body. Upper house in India is absolutely an elected body, except 12 members of parliament who are being elected just like that of Sachin Tendulkar, nominated by the president, and Lata Mangeshkar like that person. But all others are elected from the state legislative assembly. So it's a structured system. I don't think that any structural change is required in Rajya Sabha. See, if you see that the strength of democracy in India, even the government is having the majority in Lok Sabha, and using this brutal majority, most of these bills are being pursued, or it is being, we are saying in parliament that it is being bulldozed because of the big majority in the Lok Sabha, but they are not able to pass it because of the hurdles there in the Rajya Sabha. So the check and balance is there only because of the Rajya Sabha. So it's a good system of parliament which we are having. But in most of the other countries in world democracies, if you see, this upper house is a celebrity house. Most of them are being nominated, even in UK also. It is according to even fancy of the government like that way. But in India, the system is good, though it is, we have followed it from we have adopted from a colonial system of governance. Still, the constitution of India is very clear about the upper house, its rights, privileges, everything. So it's a best system. I think that no need of any change in the Rajya Sabha structure, I think, because some discussions have taken place in India regarding structural changes in the upper house.
If I may clarify, she was asking, the upper house is the house of the states, and the lower house is the house of the people. That is the fundamental difference. So when it is the house of states, in the US, each state has got 2 representatives, senators, 50 states, 100 senators. So she was asking whether it would not be better if in Indian upper house also, each state is given equal representation, irrespective of the population, irrespective of the area. That was the
Sorry, I missed that point. So really correct, because the proportional representation, the structure of electing people or members to the upper house, that's also based on the population criteria. Suppose from UP and from Goa, UP you are electing only 2 members of parliament, means the state representation is adequately is not there. So definitely this should be a proportional representation, and the 1 by the number retiring by rotation. Also it's a good formula we have adopted, a well structured formula. So it is better to have it is based on the population, because number of members of legislative assembly is based on the population, and election to the upper house is also based on the number of members in the legislative assembly.
MP Joseph. First, a quick comment on what Dr. Prabhachandran said. One of the risks of basing everything on population is that a state like Kerala, which has made great move greatly in terms of controlling population, will get always stuck with much lesser votes in parliament and in the upper house now, if we focus too much on population. Just a comment. But my question was something different, again, starting back to what you said about an ideal democracy being where people have much more power. And I think you mentioned that in terms of the Lambeth Council. Now, if you look ahead, maybe 10, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, with technology progressing so very fast, is there not a distinct possibility that we can perhaps, in the extreme, do away with parliament altogether? Where, no, I'm not, your jobs will be safe. But then, not perhaps doing away with parliament altogether, but then people voting directly to determine whether laws should be passed or not. Referendums, it gives us, the connotation of referendum is much more, unfortunately, something that sounds very, as though there's a big war. But this is where you can press a button, sitting on your laptops or your smartphones, and determine whether a particular instead of 500 MPs voting in parliament,
the country, or 18 plus or 20 plus, 21 plus, vote directly to determine whether the legislation needs to be passed or not. Isn't that a possibility that we should be looking at, where direct democracy can, in fact, gain much more strength than what indirect democracy that we have today?
I just wanted to come back on your last question. You're absolutely right about technology and how that can play more of a part. And in fact, in the UK, we see more and more social media and campaigns through the internet are playing much more of a role in our parliament. For example, if you get, is it 100,000 signatures? If there's 100,000 people sign an online petition, that triggers a debate in Parliament on that subject already. Now, can we go further? Yes, we can. As we've seen in the UK around referendum, you sometimes have to be very careful what you wish for, because that's how we ended up with Brexit. So I think there has to be an element, because what we also see in the UK, and I do know from speaking to some of your local politicians, social media and the internet can be quite corrosive of society too. So we have to be very careful that we have checks and balances in there. And I think, you know, you have to trust the people that you elect more to take decisions on your behalf. And the good thing about democracy is that if you don't like the way your MP or your local politician acts on your behalf, you can sack him at the next general election or local election. So, in short, I think yes, technology can play a much bigger role in Parliament, as we've started to see that in the UK, and I suppose that will develop over time as that becomes more prevalent. But I also think, on the same token, you have to put more faith in those people that you elect, whether that's through a national parliament, state parliament, local parliament, but on the basis that Steve's spoken about what he tried to achieve in Lambeth. The key is, of course, giving the power to people all throughout, whichever level of society you're living in.
So many times we are facing some debates. The economic devolution, financial devolution, everything depends on the population. So the number should be according to the population. We cannot, because same criteria cannot be maintained. Most of the times, even if you compare with Tamil Nadu and Kerala also, this political pressure exerted by the Tamil Nadu is too much compared to Kerala. But that is there for the smaller states.
The whole concept of an upper house, a house of the state, Rajya Sabha, is that in a federal democracy like ours, states should have equal representation. It doesn't matter whether UP has got a population of 10 times or 100. The whole concept of an upper house or a Rajya Sabha, house of states, at least in the Indian situation, where we are a federal democracy unlike UK, is that the states should be equally represented. That every state should have equal representation of the center, because all the states are equal. And whether Kerala has a population of 3 crores and UP 10 times that, or even more, each state should be equally represented. So the moment you switch to a population-based upper house, even that advantage is lost. And in the long run, that can also spell difficulties in an integrated nation.
It's entirely a different perspective that has to be discussed.
Maybe I can make a clarification on that point.
Can we have some
This particular discussion is over. I thought we could change the subject to gender equality. Yay! Particular interest in this issue. What I really wanted to bring up is how is it possible, to achieve gender equality, and what are the ways in which UK is taking steps to achieve this. Actually, in India, the perception is that for a woman to be successful in politics, she has to have high political connections. I mean, you have to be the wife of a politician or daughter of one person to make headway in politics. But I should say that Kerala probably bucks that trend, because here merit is always considered the first criteria. We have even tried to legislate gender equality by bringing in a bill for 30% reservation and so on for women. But my question is, how can you possibly really effectively legislate gender equality? There should be more, grassroots ways of empowering women to take part in parliamentary democracy and successive.
Thank you for your question. I've been waiting for that for an hour. First of all, I would say that finding your voice is really important, and political parties in the UK are trying to do that more now. But some of the questions that were asked earlier about democracy and parliamentary democracy, and Steve answered some of it in terms of giving power back to the grassroots. But to be honest, in the UK and in India, people who are poor, or people that are women, or people that are disabled are not represented in our democracy. They're not given those voices, and in the UK we still don't have those voices. I was elected on an all-women shortlist. I stood in another constituency before, and I was up against men and couldn't win, even though I was as good, if not better, because if you look at the man in comparison to where I am, when we both went into Parliament at the same time, I am way ahead in terms of my career. And yet I didn't finish my education, and I was pregnant at 16 and was looked down on. I was poor. So there is still disparities in the UK and opportunities from people, either for women, and I wasn't connected to any politicians either, and I found it very difficult in Parliament. You know, they want you there, but as a symbol. We'll have one or two as a symbol, but don't speak unless we tell you what to say. Yeah, so England's, Britain's not that forward, if I'm honest, in terms of that. We still have problems, but we are taking positive steps towards that, and I was very much opposed to hard targets where we have the 50% must be women. I was against that at first because I thought it would make me look like a lesser politician, so Steve would be a better politician than me because he was on an open list, whereas I had to have mine given to me. I felt that that would be condescending to my talent. But actually, unfortunately, unless we do that, we're waiting hundreds of years for society to catch up and understand that women can speak just as well as men can. So if we have to have hard targets, I believe that's a way forward. I'm really upset that you wasn't able to get that bill through Parliament. Hopefully that will be the case, and keep pushing it, and at every level make women's voices heard. In the UK, we have women gather together now. Women work together, so from business, from different organisations, from the media, from politicians at local level, right through to Parliament. We make connections. You know the saying, the old boys network? Yeah. We have a girls network now to try and combat that. So if I see another girl that I think has talent, I tap that girl on the shoulder and say, come, I help, and try and help her get forward and to give her confidence to stand and to support her. And I think that's how we have to do it. Hard targets as well as supporting, women supporting each other. And I'll end on men. You must help your daughters, wives, sisters, aunts get forward as well, because if it's only with the men helping the women that women will find their place and voices as well, because you have to move over and let the women in.
I got very, very brief. I just wanted to back up what Angela said. As a man, I think it's very important that men are feminists and that we support the empowerment of women. And as an MP, we all do our own things in our locality. But I've set up a leadership development program that all the participants are either from ethnic minority groups or are women or from other minority groups. And it's very important that we empower people to take stake on these opportunities, but that we build power all the way through society. It's not just about Parliament, although that must be representative, of course it must, but we have to support women and underrepresented groups to take power at every level in society, whether it's in work, in business, in the schools, in civil society. We have to all work towards that, because if every citizen is able to have their voice heard, then the decisions we take as a society will be better for everybody, men as well. We all benefit.
ask a question? Sure. It's about the quality of MPs or parliamentarians. Probably in India, when we see the debates of Rajya Sabha, upper house and lower house that happened over the years, definitely there's a qualitative decline in the debates that are happening, and it reflects on the quality of MPs. Here, my question is to Mr. Premachandran. Are we really selecting candidates based on their quality or ability or their inability, like a comedian or a film star or a Latin Catholic from a particular constituency or a Muslim from a particular? Why is it happening in India?
Very difficult question to answer because the social contingency, if you know, that's why I have suggested that the electoral politics have its own inherent deficiencies are there. Most of the time, this qualitative analysis is not being done. See, suppose the recent election which took place in Tamil Nadu, if you take it as an example, one official spokesman of the responsible party has said that in a particular simple legislative assembly constituency, they have spent more than 300 crores. So the money is playing a very important role in influencing the electorate. And communal podcasts, religion, and so many other social factors are nowadays involved. When such influence is dominating the electoral system or elections in electing a particular person to the parliament, definitely the qualitative change will take place in the parliament also. You are absolutely correct that the debate, the quality of debate, first I came to parliament in the year 1996. The quality of debate 20 years back and the quality of debate now we are witnessing, drastic difference is there. So that is because of this thing what we are electing the people, definitely that has to be addressed our way. I am not able to answer to that question, but still we have to think of it.
First, this is a former civil servant and a former student of Strathclyde Business School in Glasgow a few years ago. So my question is, we had a discussion of whether it should be democracy by the whole people or democracy by the elected representatives of the people. So you mentioned that people have to believe in their elected representative, that they would represent their interests. The elected man will represent the people's interests. And if he fails, he can be removed by the people in the next election. Very good. But if that is the situation where the people should have a say for selecting the candidate of the major political parties. Here, unfortunately, in India, one point which Mr. Premachandran, maybe he, for want of time, did not mention, that is internal democracy within the political party. That is totally missing. The boss of the Labour Party, he sits and decides all the candidates in all the 600 constituencies in Europe, in UK. A similar situation here. The boss of the party decides either his own son, his daughter, or his Frenchman. Somebody will carry his bags. So long as that situation continues, democracy in India becomes meaningless. It is not democracy, it is democracy in name only, it is by the leader. Yeah. A few leaders are controlling everything. That's right. That's right.
But in connection with this, can I make a point? We have a system of this election manifesto. Before election, every party or every group has an election manifesto. But it mostly remains a ritual so far as India is concerned. I don't know about UK. So, shouldn't there be, like all these people they have said, make it effective? Shouldn't there be a discussion both by the ruling party and the opposition? How much have they gone ahead with their manifesto? I mean, all level discussion regarding that. So since I got this opportunity, I wanted to ask you one more question. See, as a layman in Kerala, I feel that the European Union is somewhat like a balance of power between the extreme right and the have-not nations. No, the UK was a part of this European Union. Its advantage was that it had its own monetary system and it had its own this visa regulation and all that. In spite of that, UK leaving the European Union, what is the justification? I feel like it is very, for us it's a bad decision. For people like Kerala, Indians and other developing countries, it's a bad decision. I think can we just work this can.
Can I just answer that question? Well, a couple of questions there. The gentleman over here about party selection, he's absolutely right. However, in the UK, we see the parties adopting different types of selection. When I was elected, I did what we call an open primary. So the party locally whittled down, there was to the final 4 people. So 2 women and 2 men, because we have positive action, I think you call it.
Well
Thank you. Well, we have to have equal numbers of men and women. So there was 4 of us, and then we were presented at a night. Everybody from the constituency was invited, if you were on the electoral roll, to come and vote, and that's how I was selected. So there are different models being tried out from both sides of the political divide in the UK, and hopefully what you're describing happens here in India will whittle away in the UK. In regards to your question about Brexit, we don't have a monetary union anyway with Brexit, just so that you understand that. We don't have the euro, we still have the British pound. But actually, I strongly believe one of the key reasons the UK is leaving the European Union is because of British people's lack of trust in political decisions, not just in the UK, but also in Europe too. Some of the things that you see here and some of the things that you describe about how power within the EU is focused on a handful of people that constantly make decisions that affects everybody's lives. People are pushing back on that. And I think it was Steve that mentioned earlier, we've seen lots of decisions around the world, like Donald Trump in America and almost Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, and of course the Brexit referendum. That, without question, is people pushing back, and also extremist parties taking advantage of that position. Not quite telling truths about things like immigration. And we don't have to talk to you guys about immigration because we have so many Keralites living in the UK. And of course, the Kerala economy is based very much on money coming in from expats. So the British people don't tend to get how important immigration is to our economy either. So you get extremist parties exploiting that perception that immigration is bad. But without question, for me, it's about lack of trust in politicians making decisions on behalf of the people. That would be my take. Does anybody want to have a...
So, future of democracy lies in the future, next generation. So, I expect questions from the audience here.
Yeah.
Good morning. How far Britain includes alternative sexuality in the governing bodies?
We can take a few questions more. We can venture questions. Yeah. Go ahead. Alternative position.
If I can ask another
No,
question.
can you repeat?
Alternative decision making.
How far Britain includes alternative sexuality in the governing bodies?
Alternative sexuality. Yeah. A few more questions.
Good morning, sir. I have a question. In the Indian system, we have seen that a concern was raised by our first president, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, at the time when educational qualifications weren't raised for the ministers. And I feel that educational qualifications, the basic standards are set norms must be there for each person representing the public. So how does UK and India relate this issue? And at the same time, I've seen in UK that Indians being elected into the House of Commons, how are you able to accommodate such a diversity in the House of Commons? Because this is something which is not seen in the Indian Parliament, whereas in the British Parliament we see that people of Indian origin are members. And that is a very commendable thing. But at the same time, I want to know your perspectives on how such a diversity will enhance the working of the nation or the progress in the long term.
One more?
Yeah. I have two questions. My first question to both the I have two questions, and both my questions are to both the countries, I would say. First is, do you think both our countries have legacy issues in our parliament? Do you think we both are facing legacy issues? When I say legacy issue is, are you saying 17th century institutions and laws, we are trying to work them out for the 21st century's issues and concerns? So don't you think we need to change the whole, maybe the institution, we make changes out there, because we need a certain outcome. Is it possible from the 17th century institution? My second question is, there's a debate in both our countries on the proportional representation and FTP, the first past the post. So I would want to understand what's the take of both, because there is this section of electorate which swings the whole election. And so when the government comes into power, their appeasement policies are according to that particular electorate. So that makes a huge difference. So I just want to know your opinion.
Good morning, sir. The father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, once said that true democracy cannot be worked by 20 men sitting at the center. True democracy cannot be worked by 20 men sitting at the center. And like what Premachandran had said that the ruling party had only 30% vote share and the majority and the rest of the people are waiting outside. And adding to that, Gandhi said that democracy is nothing but it is all about losers who select the winners. Democracy is nothing but losers who select the winners. And in that sense, how can democracy go in parallel with this parliamentary administration, which is considered as the sole administrative system of the country? And how democracy is responsible or relevant to this parliamentary system of administration? Thank you.
It's probably safer if we don't all try to answer all of those questions, because there's an awful lot there, but a lot of it was about power. So the first question at the back was about alternative representation of people with alternative sexuality. But my very small claim to fame is that I am the first out-gay candidate to ever win a parliamentary by-election in British electoral history. And you know, when I was young, the United Kingdom was a very discriminatory country. But over my lifetime, it's changed dramatically. Not because Parliament led change, but because the people fought for change. Oppressed people, you know, gay people, women, ethnic minorities, they didn't get power given to them, they fought for it. And it's very important that we recognise that power is in the community, not just in Parliament. And people have to fight for their rights, and eventually Parliament will recognise it. Now, progressive political parties recognise the need to support underrepresented groups, because we recognise that the country works better if everybody can make their maximum contribution, whatever their background is. That's why we do it, because it's better for everybody. So we take affirmative action to support the representation of more people by gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, faith group, whatever it might be, because we work better that way. Now, somebody else asked about the diversity of the House of Commons. It's very good that the House of Commons is more diverse now than it previously was, but it doesn't represent the country still. It's only about a third of MPs are women, but 50%, just over 50% of the population are women. Ethnic minorities are underrepresented in the British House of Commons. So we're on a journey we're going towards it, but we're not there yet, and we have to keep pushing for it. But that push has to come from the community, not just Parliament. Parliament does not have all the power. It thinks it has, but actually power is in the hands of people, and people can assert that change. And I'll just briefly talk on the first past the post issue, because the point I said earlier on, Parliament on its own can't do it. The way we elect Parliament matters, but it's not enough on its own. My view is that there is an inequality of power in both of our countries, and we talk about inequalities of wealth and inequalities of opportunity, but we don't talk about the inequality of power. If we share power more equally so that everybody has power, we can tackle these much bigger issues much more fairly, and the empowerment models that underpin my politics are about tackling the inequality of power so that we create a fairer world.
Yeah, can I just tackle the issue on whether MPs are qualified or should have education, and also the issue that the woman at the back raised, which is a legacy issue, which I think is quite interlinked, actually. As the first person in the shadow education brief to not have a formal education qualification, I can tell you that what I usually say when I speak in conferences across the world is I have a master's in real life, which I think some people, because of the legacy issue, common people were considered, so I think even people from ethnic minorities, because their brains were smaller, or people with fixed mindset, is another way of saying it, that certain people will never be able to be intelligent, or intelligence is measured by a particular qualification at a particular time. I disbelieve that. I think that's untrue. I think people can be pushed down. I could have been very academically intelligent if it wasn't for the fact that I was poor and I didn't have those opportunities that other people were given. People who were from a higher class than me were considered intelligent because their father or they were born into wealth, so they had opportunities that people like me would never get. So I don't think the education qualification is what you require to be a member of Parliament, and I would argue actually because we've fixated on that, actually we've missed a whole generation of politicians that have more depth to them that could have really embraced the public. And actually we have a lot of disengagement in politics in the UK, and I think that's because the people think that the people at the top work for themselves and don't work for them, because they don't see an association or a link to them. They don't see how they can be seen in their eyes. So I think actually a diverse Parliament will allow people to have more confidence in it, and I don't think education helps that, and that I think is part of that legacy issue, which is and that does have to change, and as I said before, that can't just be evolution. You have to push that change through, because otherwise we'll all be dead, and our great grandchildren will still be having the same debate because it takes way too long to change it.
I think there's a theme running through some of this about what democracy actually is. It's a complicated set of things, and I think it's different in different countries at different stages. The question about whether it needs to change for the modern world, when I look, and I think my colleagues would agree with this, when we look at the way Westminster works, it looks very much from a previous century. It looks very out of date and old-fashioned. And I'm someone who likes change. But there's a part of me also that thinks that in politics you have to have consent for people to be governed. And that's partly, there are cultural differences in different places. And for people who are very involved in politics, all these arguments about proportional representation and so on are interesting. But for many, many people who it's just about what their lives are going to be like for the future, actually having a system which they can see how you can get a change. One of the proudest things I think in Britain is when we get rid of a prime minister. It doesn't need a revolution, it doesn't need violence. They're voted out, and there's a new prime minister comes in. And that's something that matters to people in Britain. So there is something about the traditions, about the system, that I think you've got to keep as well. So as you change it, there's a danger of changing it very quickly. But I think if you do that too quickly, you would lose the consent of people. So it's a subtle representation, exactly as Angela's just been saying. I think it's another theme running through today, which is somehow about the quality of representatives. Actually, what you want is representation that reflects all of society. Of course you need people who are competent to govern, but you need a whole range, and that's how you get the consent of people, that they generally feel there's a chance for everybody. And that hasn't been the way it's always seemed. So there's no end to this. It's a dynamic process of trying to change for the modern world and updating our democracies. But I'll just say making sure we take people with us and keep consent, because the alternatives are terrible. And I think the referendum was a very good example of that, where we moved away from our parliamentary tradition in Britain and came up with a result actually most of the British people don't seem to like very much. They're not very happy with it either, but when they were asked, it was an emotional decision. Do you want your country back? Of course you want your country back. But what does that mean? And if it means going into chaos and you're poorer, you don't like that. So there's a complicated set of decisions which probably parliamentarians are quite well placed to make that judgment.
On to issues regarding on the educational qualifications for the ministers and members of parliament. This issue has discussed so many times, but according to me, prescribing any educational qualifications to be a candidate for the election is not healthier for the good democracy. Right? Because we know the Indian situation still, especially in the North Indian states, the illiterate people is still lakhs of crores of people are there. To my personal experience, I can very well say, or I will convince this August audience that even those members of parliament who are not graduated or well educated, they are giving good contributions to this parliament, and they are taking up the people's cause, and the illiterate mass and the unemployment mass, all these issues are being well highlighted within the house than a well educated member. So the parliament, whether it is House of People or House of Common, it shall never be the house of the elite people. Eliteness doesn't mean that those who possess big educational qualifications. Definitely it should be, because when the societal change comes, definitely the elected people will be having such educational background and all these things. So we cannot prescribe. I don't accept this concept that prescribing some basic minimum qualifications for a people to be elected to a particular house is not good for a healthy democracy. That is the point which I would like to make. And regarding another is the legacy issue. See, no, absolutely the Constitution of India and the parliamentary system, everything is from a colonial system of governance we have adopted, but still we are changing according to the needs of the hour, because the Constitution of India has undergone more than 100 times. It has gone change even without changing the basic features of the Constitution. Still, we are changing according to the needs of the time. So, legacy issue that is already there because it is because of the history and all. And another thing, Sir Thomas has rightly cited the internal democracy within the political parties. See, in which I hope that this election commission can do a lot in this aspect. As rightly he has pointed out regarding the election manifesto, it has nothing has the value of the paper also. So many slogans, so many ambitious slogans were being made in the election manifesto, but unfortunately it is not being discussed, even within the House. So definitely this election commission can take stock of the situation. What is the election manifesto of a particular political party, how it has been implemented, or whether the promises were fulfilled. Such an audit can be made by the election commission because it is an independent constitutional organization. Definitely the election commission can bring something on this election manifesto, as well as now the financial accounting, everything is being considered and taken over by the election commission. Definitely these two aspects, the internal democracy as well as this manifesto can also be taken into consideration, the democracy to have a vibrant system of democracy in our country. Thank you very much.
This was a meeting, I think we have to stop here.